guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie and today I'm going to be giving you part 2 of If You Like This, Then You'll Like This book recommendations video. I was planning to do all of this in one video and I started with all of the contemporary books and it just got way too long. So here are some book recommendations for dystopian and fantasy. First, I'm going to start with some dystopian. If you like Renegades by Marissa Meyer, I think you might like Catwoman Soul Stealer by Sarah J. Maas. Both of these books are set in dystopian-esque worlds and they feature superheroes and supervillains. And the themes in these books are pretty similar because they both take a deeper look into what is good and what is bad and the gray area in between, because realistically, all of us fall in the gray area. Everyone has the potential for good and bad, but it's up to you how you respond, how you act. Both of these are pretty popular and they're both written by really famous authors, but I do feel like most people haven't read Catwoman because it is so different than the author's other works. But if you like superheroes, if you like Catwoman, if you like the DC world, this is the book for you. It follows Catwoman as a young teenager and growing into a young woman, and it follows a little bit of her origin story, and it also features popular characters like Batman and characters from the League of Assassins. And then Renegades follows a supervillain who goes undercover and poses as a superhero, and she befriends a gang of superheroes in order to take down their organization from the inside and bring about anarchy. They're both really good and I do highly recommend both of them. However, I will say that I like Renegades more. And next for dystopian, if you like Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi, I think you will like Elusive by Emily Lloyd-Jones. Shatter Me is set in a dystopian world in which pretty much everything is dying, the world is dying, and some people have developed superpowers and it's very much like X-Men. Some people have mutated and everyone's powers are very unique and they band together very much like they do in X-Men. This book follows a teenage girl whose touch is lethal. If she touches anyone, it quickly kills them. So she is locked away in a prison cell, hidden away from the outside world, hidden by the government, and they are keeping her to one day potentially use her as a weapon. And then Elusive is set in a dystopian world in which a virus broke out and it was very deadly, and basically it was going to wipe out the majority of the population if someone didn't do something about it. And so there was a medical scientist who created a vaccine for basically this plague, this virus, and it wasn't very well tested because they needed to get it out to the public as fast as possible to help save lives. However, because it wasn't properly tested, they didn't know it would have some unexpected side effects like giving people superpowers. Those who took this vaccine and gained special abilities are known as the immune, and they are very oppressed by the government. They are forced to work for this special agency of the government to track down other immune. And then those who took the vaccine but did not develop special abilities are still very much oppressed. They are heavily documented, and if they do not have the proper documentation on them at all times, they can be sent to prison just for not having their documentation. The superpowers in this world are very unique and it does really remind me of the Shatter Me world. However, it is also very similar to The Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken, so I could also say if you like this, then you'll like this. The Darkest Minds is set in a dystopian world in which another virus broke out. However, it only affected the children, and any child who survived ended up with superhuman abilities. There are many different types of powers, but they are grouped into, I think, like 5 groups and separated by colors. So these superhuman abilities are actually much more like the powers in The Darkest Minds, because while these are unique, they are separated into different categories. One of the main characters in this book has the ability to control people's minds, and the main character in this book is called an illusionist, meaning she can pretty much control people's minds. However, it's not quite as in-depth as the powers in this book. Basically, illusionists can get in people's heads and make them see whatever it is that they want to see. They can change the appearances of people or places or even make things or people invisible. The main character also teams up with a gang of other immune people, and together they wreak havoc, and they're actually white-collar criminals, so they do a lot of art heists. And then for my next recommendation, I'm pairing a dystopian book with a fantasy book. Once again, I'm bringing back Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. I've already explained what this book is about if you don't already know. But like I mentioned earlier, the main character in this story actually has a lethal touch. If she touches somebody, they die. So if you like that aspect of this story, then I think you will also like Graceling by Kristen Kishore. This is an old YA fantasy series set in a world in which some people are graced with special abilities. Their grace can be anything from what we would generally consider a typical superpower or it could be something mundane. The main character in this story is actually graced with killing. So while her touch isn't lethal, if she wants you dead, you're going to be dead. If you like a lot of political intrigue in your fantasy novels, I think you will really like this one. Now I'm going to get straight on into fantasy. If you like Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, I think you will like Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Rhodes. Shadow and Bone is set in a fantasy world called the Grishaverse, and it is very intricate and very vivid, and that's one of the main reasons why I love this world. There are many different countries in this world. Each one is inspired by a different real-life culture, but this series mostly focuses on the country Ravka, which is inspired by Russia. It's very cold, there's a lot of snow, a lot of ice, and it gives you a lot of wintry feels. And then Fallen Kingdoms is set in a fantasy world in which there are 3 different kingdoms on this continent, and all of them are vying for power. Some of them are very wealthy, but others are oppressed and in poverty because of the rule of these other nations. This book follows 3 main characters, each one coming from a different country. One is a princess, one is a prince, and one is an impoverished rebel. While the worlds themselves aren't similar, they have similar feels to them. As I mentioned before, there is a lot of wintry vibes coming from Shadow and Bone because there's a lot of snow, a lot of ice, a lot of cold weather, and that is also the case for Fallen Kingdoms as well. Both of these series focus on the different countries at war, so in that way they are also similar. However, I will say that Shadow and Bone has a very large and intricate magic system, and it very much focuses heavily on that magic system. And then Fallen Kingdoms is very different in that regard. It mostly focuses on the political intrigue and the world and the characters. And lastly, I'm going to be recommending some fairy tale fantasy retellings. If you like The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh, I think you might like The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Corey. Both of these are retellings of different stories, however they are very similar. The Wrath and the Dawn is a retelling of 1001 Nights, and The Forbidden Wish is a twisted spin on Aladdin. This story is set in a Persian-inspired fantasy world in which there is this evil king lording over the land, and he takes a new bride every single day, and the next morning he kills them. So he's like going through a bride every day. He's a mass murderer, basically. But despite knowing she will probably be killed, the main character actually volunteers to become the king's wife. The main character's best friend was a previous bride of the king, and he had her murdered, and so the main character, Shazi, volunteers to become his wife as an act of revenge. She has a plan to somehow, hopefully, put an end to his rule. And then, of course, The Forbidden Wish is a retelling of Aladdin. However, instead of the genie being a blue man, the genie is actually a beautiful young female. While these books are retellings of different stories, they actually have a ton in common. I could be wrong, but I believe the original story for this retelling comes from the Arabian Nights, which is actually a collection of different Arabian stories in which the story of Aladdin actually comes from. I could be wrong on that because I haven't read the Arabian Nights, but that is my understanding of it. So these are both set in the same world of the original material. The magic carpet from Aladdin is the same magic carpet that is used in The Wrath and the Dawn. There are a lot of similarities. But regardless, if you like Persian-inspired fantasy worlds, you like the feel of Aladdin, you will like both of these books, I think. I will say that they both do focus heavily on romance, so be aware of that before going into it. It's not all about the fantasy elements. Particularly this first book, this is actually a duology, and the first book heavily focuses on the romance, and you don't really get into the fantasy elements of the world until the second book. This one is a standalone, and the fantasy elements very much are present within the story, but it is heavily focused on romance. Alright, that is the end of this recommendations video of if you like this, then you'll like this. I hope you got some good recommendations, and maybe I recommended books to you that you've never heard of. Don't forget to check out part 1 if you missed it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more bookish content by me. Let me know in the comments down below what book on this list you are most excited to read, or if you have read most of these, let me know in the comments down below which one's your favorite. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.